All right, thanks for joining today. This is just a quick prezi on an issue that is quite near and dear to many people's hearts. It relates to plastic bags versus paper bags and single-use bags versus multi-use bags. The great debate of how we should be carrying things. First, debate one is really about plastic versus paper. Debate number two is really about single-use versus multi-use. And both these things complicate the decisions that we try to make as we're walking out of a grocery store or a retail store. Again, debate number one is really about, should I be taking plastic, should I be using paper, natural bags, or should I really be maybe using a single-use bag versus a multi-use bag? So that's really the other debate that's out there. I've used these two caribou, or elk I think, as symbols for the battle between these different camps. And the circles that are kind of embedded in them, we'll come back to those, but essentially they represent different life cycles of life stages of those types of bags. On the far left is kind of the production or transportation side of those new bags. The middle part's the use, and then the circle on the far right is the end of life, what happens to them end of life. And the size of them is meant to somewhat represent the impact on the natural environment as well. So just to give a bit of a background on those shapes that we'll be coming back to in a minute. So essentially we've got these two debates that are going on, and really people are frustrated trying to solve these things. And I'm frustrated listening to people talk about it because while it's an important issue when you're going out to the grocery store, I think it's kind of a limited issue overall. So hopefully this will provide some ways forward so we can get past the debate towards some solutions, and then use this technique of doing that to apply to much larger societal issues and opportunities. Because really debating or choosing one over the other doesn't get us anywhere, because there's drawbacks with single-use bags versus multi-use bags, and there's drawbacks in both types. There's drawbacks between plastic and paper bags. They both have issues, and none of these options are really perfect. So debating about choosing between two imperfect things isn't really that fun, and it's not going to get us anywhere. So there's got to be a better way. And the better way is to not look at the limitations of today, what we're being offered, but to think about what does a better bag or carrier or tote look like, and start there. So start from a point of success as opposed to a point of mediocrity that we have right now with all the current systems. So to do that, to think of a better bag, well, we need to have some criteria. So just for this case, we're using the natural step principles for sustainability, which can be applied really at any scale, from a community plan right down to the type of materials or production process for bags. And then just using some criteria here to help design a bag that works really well for the user as well, not just well for the environment. Because you can make a really good bag for the environment, but if it's not easy to use, then it's not going to make any headway. So you need to include those criteria as well. So, of course, first off, the bag's got to be fashionable. It's got to be good value. So if it's a single-use bag, it's got to be really cheap for that single use. If it's a multi-use bag, it's got to probably cost a bit more, but not too much. The bag always needs to be where you need it. That is an issue with lots of different types of bags. Of course, you need to have the bag where you need it. It's got to be relatively clean. That's a criteria most people have for bags. It's easier if it stands up, especially for people in the shop who are trying to load up the bags, especially at a grocery store. Or for the folks who are traveling perhaps on the bus and don't want their bag to fall over and have the apples strewn across the bus floor. So standing up is probably a pretty good design criteria for bags. It needs to promote loyalty, perhaps, for the business that's giving out the bags. That's a bit of an advertising thing, and you really support the brand of the organization that's giving it out. And of course, it needs to help whoever is selling those bags or giving them out to customers. Needs to help them make a profit, of course, or it's not going to be a useful product. Okay, so that kind of gets at the human and I guess in the business side of what the bag needs to look like. But from a sustainability perspective, let's look first at how it's manufactured and the impact on other people. So we probably want it to be affordable so that everyone can access the bag who needs it. We probably want it to be made from fair trade types of materials. We want the bag to be safe and support health, so that kind of relates to the cleanliness of it. You probably want it to come from an area that has a pretty good human rights record and maybe a democratically elected government, to ensure that the folks' rights are kind of looked out for in the communities where these bags might be being made. So that kind of deals with kind of the social equity part of sustainability. There's a couple other criteria as well that are there. Number 3 is really a principle that talks about not degrading the natural environment through physical means, and obviously using recycled material means that you don't need to go out and get virgin products and trees like that to make paper bags, or potentially it's made from recycled fabrics. You don't have to go out and grow it again through agriculture. But if it does come from those areas for virgin fibers, it should come from a well-managed ecosystem, and the bag should be really reusable so that you don't have to keep going back and getting new stuff, or materials that are reused, should be produced using very sensitive renewable energy sources, and the process should be really energy efficient. I'm looking at number 2, which talks about reducing the buildup of synthetic materials. You can design a bag that reduces the buildup of synthetic materials in nature by ensuring that you're using recycled materials. So again, you're not creating new materials that can build up in nature. If you're using synthetic materials, they're used in a closed loop so that they don't escape into nature, or just give up on synthetic altogether and just use natural materials and reused materials as much as possible. And if you are growing some new things, make sure it's organically grown fabrics, so you don't have to use synthetic pesticides and herbicides to grow those that eventually will get out into nature. And finally, looking at the last principle here, number 1, which essentially talks about materials from the Earth's crust, like fossil fuels and heavy metals building up in nature, and trying to reduce that so that the best bag or the better bag will reduce that and eliminate it. So again, choosing recycled materials that are already out in nature and in society to create the bags would reduce bringing new things into nature. Keeping things in a closed loop so they don't escape to nature would be critical. Reusing as much as possible. Again, using renewable energy and efficient techniques to reduce the need for fossil fuels and the carbon to escape from the crust into nature. And again, perhaps using natural materials instead of things that are not natural things from the Earth's crust, so focusing on those. So really all of those criteria help you define what a better bag would look like. All right, so moving on, with this criteria, what does that do? Well, it can help us to create a better carrier and a better tote. And really each one of these pathways, whether it's the plastic single-use or the multi-use or the natural fibers versus synthetic fibers, they all have a potential pathway to a better carrier tote. And the way to get there is to define that better carrier tote first, and then look at the challenges that each one of these pathways needs to deal with in order to create the best carrier bag or tote to be used for shopping and carrying things around through our day-to-day living. So looking at the plastic single-use bags, first of all, what are the challenges for this path? Well, going back to the debate diagram, really the issue about plastic single-use bags is the disposal issue. So that critical issue has to be dealt with somehow for these to be a better bag. That's really the main issue with that particular one. Looking at the single-use natural bags, the challenges for this path are not really the disposal phase, it's really the production phase, so the amount of energy that goes into that process, and potentially where those products are coming from, if it's from virgin natural fibers or recycled fibers. So that's really where the environmental impact seems to lay with that type of a bag, looking at the current products that are out there today. There's also some issues around use. It falls apart if they get too wet as well. So those are some of the challenges for the single-use natural bag. Looking at the multi-use plastic bag or tote, challenges for this path, again, because it's a multi-use thing, there's quite a bit of energy use when it's being created as well, so that's primarily the main impact place for that. The other bits where there may be some challenges relates to forgetting it, not actually having it where you need it, whereas those single-use bags are always right at the checkouts at those stores or grocery store, retail stores or grocery stores. So you might forget the tote. You may end up using more of them because you've forgotten them. And the issue of cleanliness, I guess, and hygiene, especially from a food perspective, is one that has to be dealt with. And because it's made of plastic, it's also got this issue that it's supports the fossil fuel industry with all its associated impacts. And ultimate disposal, what happens to that plastic and the materials that are used in making that plastic as it's disposed of ultimately at some point in the future. So those are some of the issues with the multi-use plastic bag. And of course, the multi-use natural bag isn't free of challenges. The challenges for this path currently are again related to the high energy use for production, the weight during transport, because they weigh quite a bit, and potentially if they're made of fibers, especially agricultural fibers, could be dirty agriculture or unsustainable agriculture that uses lots of synthetic things. So those are really the potential challenges with that type of bag today. Again, they also have the same issues of the multi-use plastic totes, which is you could forget them, so you end up using more, and the fact that they may not be clean every time you want to use them. So those are really the challenges with each type of bag that's being debated right now everywhere on this issue. So once you have a better carrier tote defined, it's easier to think about what needs to be done in each of these situations of each of the current bags to make a better carrier tote. And without success defined, it's really hard to make a decision about which is the best one today, because really each one of them potentially has a pathway to the better carrier tote. So the issues for each bag, I've kind of aligned them here underneath each of the diagrams, and the ones that are red are the ones that are difficult challenges to potentially solve. The yellow ones are probable to solve, and the green ones are possible to solve, probably quite easy to solve. And this gives us some sense of how to solve them and which pathway is the best one to work on. So looking at the natural type bags, really the single-use one of the issues is standing up, ensuring that it's reusable, making them more and made of, at least once anyway, potentially made of recycled materials, that they're strong enough to withstand a little bit of moisture, and then trying to keep them in a closed loop. Those are the challenges, I think, and the level of difficulty in solving those challenges. With the multi-use natural bag, really the wash impacts of the use is one of the challenges. So to keep them clean, maybe washing them a lot, so that's one of the major challenges to try to deal with. Of course, trying to get them to stand up. Natural things are harder don't stand up quite as well as rigid plastic containers. Ensuring it's where you need it, is a bit of a challenge, but probably probable to solve. Making sure they're good value is probable to solve. Making them out of recycled materials, making sure they're durable enough are probably pretty easy things to deal with. Looking at the single-use plastic bag, the main challenges here is again making it stand up so it's easy to use at the stores, ideally, and that the plastic is kept in a closed loop, and it's made of non-toxic types of plastics, which may end up being a bioplastic versus a fossil fuel one, but definitely something that's a bit more difficult to solve than the idea of reusing them once or making them from 100% recycled materials. Those are probable to solve a little bit easier. Now, looking at the multi-use plastic bag, again, it's not perfect today. It's got some challenges, but it could be a better tote as long as these challenges could be dealt with. So making sure it's non-toxic plastics, making sure the wash impacts are limited, are probably challenging ones for this pathway that need to be dealt with. Ensuring it's where you need it is kind of a challenge that's probable to be solved. Making sure it's made of recycled materials, that it's in a closed loop. Again, easier to keep in a closed loop than a single-use bag because there's more plastic in it. It's got more value to recover, and so there's more interest probably in recovering those for something than the single-use bags. So a little bit easier to solve that issue. Making sure they're durable enough and that they're good value are probably pretty easy things to solve. A little bit easier to solve the good value issue here with plastic things, just because they tend to be cheaper than making natural products like the multi-use natural bag. So those are the challenges that need to be solved to make each one of these pathways move into really a better carrier, a better bag. But as you can see, it probably is possible to achieve success with either one of these pathways. So which one's better to choose today? Well, it's hard to say. I don't think the answer is that clear. The ones here that have more red might be ones that are going to be harder to make toward a better bag. So perhaps those are pathways that you choose not to take, and instead you focus on the single-use natural and multi-use natural, and then really try to work on those challenges, which hopefully are a little bit easier to overcome to make the better carrier tote than the plastic ones. Or potentially you choose the plastic route with organizations that are really focused on getting rid of those and overcoming those challenges that the plastic bags face. But we can influence it, and where? How can we influence it as consumers? How can we influence it as municipalities creating policy around plastic bags and carriers? Well, for the plastic single-use bag, in order to kind of fix that approach, there's two things you can do. You can regulate the use, essentially saying they're not being used at all, and say, you know what, the challenges here are too big. There's 3 other pathways that will get us to a better bag, and we think we're innovative enough to use one of those other ways to get to a better bag. And that's what, there are some communities that are regulating the use of plastic single-use bags and essentially saying you can't use them for the most part. That's one approach, recognizing there's 3 other pathways that might work. If you want to give people more choice, you might still allow this pathway, but instead of doing nothing about it, you can do some education about the issues with plastic use bags. You can perhaps have deposit fees to make sure those bags come back and they don't become disposal issues. You can use waste reduction approaches with those bags, trying to get people to use the bag more than once. You could ban plastic from the landfill, and for the deposit fee to make sure that those bags, don't end up out in nature and causing issues in landfills. You could have purchasing guidelines that you have in place through some regulations, ensuring that the bags are made from recycled materials. At the same time, you could work on the big sustainability issues that relate to single-use plastic bags and really all products that we use, things like working towards sustainable energy, working towards sustainable water use, working toward benign materials that are non-toxic. Focusing on those issues will, in general, will help deal with plastic single-use bags. Again, a lot of these bags are just white, so you could always brand the bag with your community or with the store name on them to get some more marketing value out of them. So those are some of the potential solutions for the plastic single-use bag and moving that toward a better carrier tote. So it is possible with some different approaches. Looking at the multi-use plastic bag, again, some of the major issues in this one are is trying to get them to be non-toxic, reducing wash impacts, making sure it's where you need it, making sure they're made of recycled materials, making sure they're durable enough, and making sure they're good value. And the way to deal with that, again, is educating people about choices that they make, potentially providing a deposit reuse service for these totes in your community or through a store, so that you, when you need the bags, it's always there. If you have to pay a small fee to use it, you get the bag, you can use it, but you can also return it and get it reused again, so you don't have this mountain of reusable containers building up in your house. You can apply typical waste reduction approaches to how they're made, making sure they're used frequently. The bags are used frequently, again and again. You could regulate for materials, so regulate for non-toxics, regulate for materials that are made from bags that are made from 100% recycled materials. Ensure that water in the community is being used super efficiently when the bags are being washed, and that the soaps and products are non-toxic. And then you can brand the bag. And again, just like the other single-use bag, work on big sustainability issues along the way as well. Looking at the single-use natural bag, again, really the minor issues here were ensuring it could stand up, making sure it's reused at least once, making sure they're a bit stronger in moist conditions, making sure they're made of recycled materials and trying to keep them in a closed loop when they're done and composted or disposed of properly. A way to get there is to, again, educate about the impacts of these bags and how to reduce them. Again, you can have deposit fees on the bags so they come back and don't end up in the landfill. They end up in proper composting facilities. Apply typical waste reduction approaches, getting people to reuse them. Brand the bag, again, to get some more mileage out of it. Regulate for material content and to ensure that they stand up so they can ensure they're made from 100% recycled fibers as opposed to new fibers. And then again, work on big sustainability issues. So there's a bit of a pattern here you see about always still working on the big sustainability issues beyond plastic versus paper bags to help reduce the impact of these products. So looking at the multi-use natural, the final one, the big issues here is trying to make sure they stand up. You want to reduce the washing impacts. It's where you need it, good value, recycled materials, and make sure they're durable enough. So again, to deal with that, educate about the current impacts so that people understand what to ask for and they want to improve them. Support a service, kind of a deposit service similar to the multi-use plastic bags where folks can use the bag and then return them when they're finished so they don't have big mountains of these bags building up in their homes, using more resources than is needed. Regulate for the type of materials and other types of options to ensure that the bags meet certain specifications, so make sure they're made of 100% recycled fibers if you can, or organic fibers. Brand the bag with your community name perhaps, and then promote water and waste reduction approaches in the community to really reduce those impacts from washing the bags. And then again, work on big sustainability issues like sustainable energy, non-toxic products, and fair trade rules and regulations. All right, so as you can see, all of today's options do have a path toward a better bag. So the debate about which is better today is kind of a useless debate. It's when you start thinking about what a perfect bag looks like, you can realize that really all the options have a path toward the better bag. And really the debate should be, instead of about what's better today, it's about which bag is best poised and which industry is best poised to get us toward that better bag. And if you know that, then that might be the bag you want to choose. But really all the options are capable of doing it. And you'll see those challenges that I've kind of outlined there for each bag are questions you can ask to those manufacturers and the people in those industries. Just ask them how they're going to deal with all those challenges and issues. And if they have some good answers, then maybe you follow that pathway. If they don't have good answers, then you switch to one of the other 3 pathways that are available. Luckily, there's also some common solutions to supporting all these pathways, but then there's some unique ones specifically for each one of the pathways. And so if you don't want to be a community that regulates the type of bag, what you can do is apply some of these common solutions and maybe some of the unique ones to ensure that the pathways that you've got are most realistic to get to a better bag. So some of the no-brainer common solutions that seem to be consistent across all types of paths included education on how to reduce all the impacts from all the different types of bags, education on getting folks to use the bags as many times as possible, even the single-use ones. Branding the bags with your community name seemed like a common approach you could do for all of them. Working on the big sustainability issues was common across all of these, so not forgetting about sustainable energy use, non-toxics, fair trade, and making sure that you've got policies and programs on all those big issues, aside from this narrow focus on plastic bags. And then those are ones that I think are kind of no-brainer ones that make sense to do and easy to do and don't take significant resources. But you may want to also consider these other common solutions. So regulating for the type of content to ensure that the bags, no matter which pathway you're looking at, are using 100% recycled content and low-impact fibers. Ensuring that all the bags you have work really well and have handles. Making sure that they all stand up, for example. Some other common solutions would be focusing on water use reduction approaches locally and waste reduction approaches, and maybe having a ban from plastic bags and all types of bags from the landfill, ensuring that the plastic ones are recycled and that the natural fiber ones are somehow composted or turned into soils. So those are some common solutions. And then each one of the different pathways kind of has some of their own unique ones. Looking at the plastic and single-use bag, really, having a waste handling or deposit fee is probably pretty important to making sure those get back and get reused and recycled, because they're so cheap and have so little value in plastic in them, they're not that valuable at the end of life. So that's a pretty important one. And if you don't have that type of fee, then potentially just regulating them and not using them at all, not allowing them to be used in your community at all, recognizing that these three other pathways offer a host of choices for the consumer and the businesses out there. I'm looking at the multi-use types of bags, whether it's plastic or natural. Really, one of the unique solutions here might be from the municipality to support or provide a deposit or reusable bag service in the community. So those bags can be used and then washed and shared, so like a sharing service for bags, so that they don't build up so many reusable bags in our homes. Or at the same time trying to convince event producers to not give out more reusable bags. So that's something that can be done that's unique to that approach. And if you want to focus really on the single-use natural bag, again, having a waste handling fee to make sure those things come back and can be composted and turned into soils and other useful things is pretty important, so they don't just end up in the landfill in a heap. The other option, again, there is regulating, just not allowing to use them at all, and recognizing that there's two pretty decent pathways for reusable natural bags or multi-use kind of plastic bags that live out there. So, so a couple different common solutions that are kind of no-brainers, some that you should maybe consider, and then some unique ones for each type of bag to ensure that each pathway is moving toward a better tote. And if you're a municipality here, looking at what you would be doing, it really depends on what your electorate wants. If they want a lot of choice, well, there's lots of options here that still allows all these types of bags to exist. And there's some policies you can put in place to ensure that each type of bag that's being used is moving toward a better bag system. And that's kind of what's displayed here. There's obviously the options of regulating single-use bags and not allowing them to be used at all if folks are sympathetic to that cause, and recognize that there's still two pretty good pathways toward a better carrier tote. So a couple different options here, really depending on what your community wants to do. But the only way we've come to come up with all these different approaches is to recognize that neither solution today is the best, and that we need to think of the better one so that we can design better policy to get to that better carrier tote, as opposed to just accepting the imperfect bags that are available today. And better yet, really, and this comes back to where this started, which is, paper versus plastic is a bitter debate between a lot of kind of people out there working and looking at their environmental impact, but really it is minor in the scheme of things. So better yet, applying this type of strategic approach of thinking of success, or the best approach to a certain product or to solving a solution, and then looking at the current options and developing pathways for each one of those. And if we can apply that type of approach to other decisions, we're going to be much better off. So if we can apply it to decisions, about how we work together, apply it to decisions about how we're going to get around, what does success look like as far as transportation goes, what are our current options, how do they need to improve, that's going to help us get to better solutions in that issue. How we heat our homes and how we provide electricity for lighting. If we apply it to our conversations, if we apply it to the food we eat, again, what does the perfect food system look like for the different options today? What are the challenges they need to overcome that'll get us there? How we live, our homes, what they're made of, how they're built. Again, defining success for those first, and then creating those pathways to success based on what's available today is a more strategic approach than just trying to choose between the kind of imperfect solutions of today. If we apply it to how we purchase gifts, what we purchase, and how we think, how we write, how we advocate for change in our communities, if we apply that kind of approach, we'll be able to help out with some of the really big issues and challenges that are out there today, like ensuring human rights are upheld, ensuring that human-caused biodiversity loss is limited, ensuring that we limit the impacts of climate change and hopefully reverse our contribution to it, dealing with water scarcity issues, and economic fiscal cliffs and economic challenges as well. If we apply the strategic approach, we'll be able to deal with those issues in a much more practical way. And finally, equality, income equality issues, and fair trade. And if we can do that, we're going to end up with a much better place to live, and our businesses and communities will be far more successful in the future. Thanks very much for listening to this presentation today.